Hi, I'm Alex, and welcome to the second episode of Almost Everything on Almost Anything. Each week, I pick a topic I know a little bit about and we learn about it together. Today's topic is about a Roman emperor from nearly 2,000 years ago. If you've ever seen anything on TikTok or Instagram or anything on Stoicism, chances are Marcus Aurelius was the man they were speaking about. Today, we're going to go through how a man from 2 millennia ago managed to become still so relevant in the modern day. Marcus Aurelius is one of those names you hear because he pops up quite frequently if you see any content on Stoicism or just general philosophy. After reading a book by an author called Donald J. Robertson called How to Think Like a Roman Emperor, all I really knew about him was he was an emperor, he wrote a book called Meditations, and people treat him like the original don't worry about what's not in your control guy. So how did a Roman emperor, who was the most powerful human being alive at the time, end up becoming the person that people now go to for calmness, discipline, and wisdom in the modern world? That's what I wanted to work out today. So stick with me. What I wanted to find out today was about his early life, why he wrote Meditations, what Stoicism actually meant back then, and how his ideas and the man himself have survived over 2,000 years. So let's break it down. Marcus Aurelius was born in Rome on the 26th of April 121 AD to a prominent Roman family, but his childhood wasn't sheltered or lazy. He was raised by strong, disciplined people who shaped him long before he ever got near the throne. Marcus's father died when he was just 3, so he grew up mostly under the guidance of his mother, a woman named Domita Lucilla, sorry if I get that wrong, and his grandfather, a former consul. They taught him simplicity, calmness, and dignity, qualities people would notice in him for the rest of his life. Even as a boy, Marcus was different. He didn't chase luxury or attention, he preferred plain clothes, simple meals, and spent most of his time reading, thinking, and practicing philosophy. He actually slept on the floor at one point because he believed comfort made people soft. At around age 11, he discovered Stoicism, the philosophy that would define his life and make him the icon he is in the world today. His quiet seriousness caught the eye of Emperor Hadrian, who started calling him Verissimus, which means the truest one in Latin. By his teenage years, Marcus Aurelius was already known in Rome for being wise beyond his age, unfazed by any status, and unusually calm for someone so young. When Emperor Hadrian had fallen sick, he'd asked Marcus's uncle, a man named Antoninus Pius, to take over as emperor. But there was a catch. He must adopt Marcus, so he would then be the next in line after Antoninus passes. He eventually became the Roman emperor at age 40, but immediately everything went wrong. Wild is that Marcus Aurelius is seen as this calm, grounded, and peaceful man, but he lived through a very chaotic time, even by ancient Rome standards. During his reign, he dealt with multiple invasions, such as the Parthian Empire from the east and the Germanic people from the north. He dealt with the death of his brother, his co-emperor, and his closest ally in Lucius Verus, and he dealt with the worst plague in the Roman Empire's history. But during all of that, Marcus is writing private notes to himself. Not a book, not a guide for the public, just personal reminders to stay calm, stay in control, and not lose himself. Those private notes became the book that we now call Meditations, a book written while he was away on military camp, a book he never intended to be published. They were his mental notes to help him survive being the emperor during one of the toughest periods in Roman history. The phrase Stoicism gets thrown around a lot these days with motivational edits and quotes, but the real thing is actually pretty simple. Some of the main ideas are: focus on what you can control and accept what you can't. Don't let your emotions control you. Don't rely on external things to feel good, and your character is worth way more than what your success is. Marcus constantly reminds himself of these things in Meditations. He says things like, if it's endurable, then endure it. The best revenge is not to be like your enemy, and you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. The last decade of Marcus's life seemed a far cry from what he had written in Meditations. He had three major issues that he had to deal with, which were the Marcomannic Wars, the rise of his successor, his son Commodus, and the Antonine Plague, which is actually theorized to be part of the reason why he had passed away. The Marcomannic Wars was a long grinding conflict with Germanic tribes along the Danube frontier. These tribes were being pushed west by events deeper in Europe, such as mass migrations, famine, and climate shifts within the continent. And Rome was the wall that they had run into. Marcus, during his time, had a personally directed military strategy, traveled constantly between frontiers, dealt with rebellions, invasions, and political instability within the military, and had tried to rebuild the army after the plague had wiped out a huge number of his soldiers. His next issue was the name of his successor. Marcus made a decision to name his biological son Commodus as his successor. This went against Roman tradition of adopting the best man for the job. The big problem with Commodus was that he grew up in luxury, he had zero interest in philosophy, wanted nothing to do with military or statecraft, and preferred games, comfort, and being adored by the masses. Even during the final campaigns, Commodus was more interested in leaving the frontier and going back to Rome. Marcus knew all of this and still hoped he could guide him. The last issue he had to deal with was the Antonine Plague, which was likely smallpox according to accounts from modern physicians. This illness ravaged the empire and crippled them not only from an economic sense, but also had a major impact on their military activities. This plague is also to have been theorized to have been the illness that Marcus had at the end of his life. This, coupled with the constant stress of running an empire, left him very frail and very unwell. Marcus had died on the 17th of March 180 AD in modern-day Vienna or modern-day Serbia, while still on campaign. Ancient writers describe him calmly accepting death, which was very in line with his Stoic beliefs. He reportedly said something along the lines of, "Let me go, the gods want me to rest." There are also rumours that Commodus's advisors wanted Marcus dead because they were desperate to end the war and return to Rome. There's no solid evidence of this, but the timing is very suspicious to some historians that have studied it. What I've learned about the man who wrote Meditations really changed the picture I had of him. I always thought he was just this calm, wise emperor who had it all figured out. But when you actually dive into his life, you realize he wasn't calm because everything was easy for him. He was calm despite everything being difficult. He wasn't writing quotes for the world. He wasn't trying to be inspirational. He was just writing reminders to himself to stay grounded while running an empire during one of the most stressful times in Rome's history. And that's why he's still relevant today. Because most of us aren't dealing with plagues and invasions. We're dealing with stress, expectations, comparison, and just general life in modern times. And the whole message of Stoicism, especially the way Marcus lived it, is basically you can't control the world, but you can always control your attitude and your actions. For someone who had the power he did and deal with the problems that most humans alive today would collapse under, to tell himself that not everything is in his control and that he must live justly, shows that character is a choice, not a circumstance. So that's Marcus Aurelius, a Roman emperor who shaped parts of modern philosophy 2,000 years after his reign. Thanks everyone for being here today. Please like and subscribe if you enjoyed the episode, and I'll see you next week where we'll get a chance to learn about another topic.